everyone. My name is Shauna Malecki, and I'm a product marketing manager here at Nice in Contact. Today, I'm excited to be hosting John Williamson, who is a contact center manager at Vox Mobile. Today, John will be talking about managing schedule adherence using CXone Workforce Management. John brings 22 years of contact center experience managing contact centers both small and large. He manages the U.S. operations for Vox Mobile in the technical support and procurement areas. And he is a 12-year NICE customer, and he's used the NICE in Contact Cloud solution for the last 2 years. And with that, John, I'll go ahead and hand it off to you to get started.
Thank you very much, Shauna. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. I hope that you share the love I have for workforce management. It's a super important part of any contact center. Today we're going to be talking about CXone in particular and how we applied the use of CXone at Vox Mobile. So just to go over our agenda, our adherence challenge was on the impact of missing staff. We're going to talk about why and how Vox uses schedule adherence, how schedule adherence exposed the roots of our other problems, and specifically how we used WFM to measure schedule adherence, and then our lessons learned. Finally, we'll follow that with questions. So our main takeaways are having the right number of people wasn't enough. We needed to have them at the right times. Poor schedule adherence was the actual root cause of some of our other problems when it came to things like our overall service level. Schedule adherence revealed daily issues that other reports didn't display. And we'll talk a little bit of how we determine the adherence goals that fit our business. Before we get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about our business. So Vox Mobile serves enterprise mobility needs for our clients. And what that means is anything from cell phones to tablets, kiosks that you might see at restaurants. Our business, largely in our contact center, is about servicing those kind of clients. So we have our device as a service, and just as kind of a little bit of a commercial for us, with device as a service, we find the best prices for the best devices, phones, tablets, kiosks, MiFi, and others, all at one predictable flat cost. Our help desk service caters to each client's individual needs across a wide variety of mobile device platforms and devices. That includes anything from individual employee devices to enterprise mobility management servers. Clients can manage their assets through our software, where they can track orders, get information about devices, and monitor billing in one easy-to-use portal. And we also have strategic consulting services on bring your own device strategy, policy and compliance, enterprise mobility, health checks, and professional services. Our years of experience allow our clients to confidently conduct their mobility projects, whatever they may be. So I tell you that not just to let you know about Vox, but so you understand the environment that we're working in. So 24/7 contact center. Our assist centers, again, 24/7 with a split of our technical support and procurement. So technical support being the folks who are answering questions about a device, procurement being the ones who are obtaining those devices for you. So two different kind of branches in our contact center. This page here just gives you a little about the structure for us. You can see here my particular side, the U.S. Contact Center. I manage our technical support and procurement in the U.S., along with training, and then workforce planning and documentation for both the U.S. and Canada. We also have a separate office in Waterloo, Ontario, which works our technical support, procurement, and training for Canadian employees. Wireless expense management is another part of our business where we're helping customers determine the right plans to be working from. Our deployment service then is the portion of the service that actually manages to get the devices out to a person. So we'll actually kit devices, make sure that they're all set for you. So all of that ties in together, and all of these result in different questions that we might be getting throughout the day. So with that said, in a 24/7 environment that's going across 2 countries and across all the time zones in the middle, we need to be staffed at the right times for each of our individual clients. And our challenge was having missing staff throughout the day. So we had some very clear adherence issues when I first got here. We had long amounts of away from desk time, which is discretionary time folks choose to not be staffed. I'm sure each of you have your own definitions of what away from desk time looks like for your company, and are familiar with something like that happening to you. Technicians were making outbound calls while we had inbound calls holding. And lunches were being taken at incorrect times, which caused staff gaps later in the day. I put this graph together to really illustrate for you what a difference one person makes during the day. So I want you to take a look at our staff here. It's 50 calls at 18 minutes of handle time. That may be high for some of y'all. I know that's in our technical support world, we have varying degrees of call lengths. And then our goal is to answer all those calls, or answer our calls within 120-second threshold. Now, from a requirement standpoint, we can hit, this graph shows you that across the top, you can see our percentage of service level that could be achieved with the staff in blue decreasing by 1 each. So our optimal staff to meet an 85% service level would be to have 36 people on the phone. That's where you see the 36 across the bottom axis, and then the green 89%. That's the best service level we're getting while still hitting that 85. And you can see the impact of just losing one person drops us 5%, losing another person drops us into the 70s, another into the 60s. So it's really clear that adherence, just one person at a time, has a huge impact on our performance. So the reason that Vox measures schedule adherence is to make sure that we are able to keep up with these issues. So schedule adherence, as compared to using just the aggregate totals from your ACD reports, schedule adherence allows you to see not just was the person productive in the day as far as the total time that they worked, but were they working at the right time? And that's, as we've demonstrated here, is important. Schedule adherence is a reliable agent behavior metric. You can use it to drill down to individual agents to make sure that they are following their schedules, and be able to coach them from that. It provides an overview percentage for the day, so you can look at how your team is performing. And again, it's superior to a total work time metric. Picture, if you will, some folks will have a setup where you're using your ACD reports throughout the day, and you might see that a person is taking 30 minutes lunch or an hour lunch, whatever they're scheduled for, and you think everything's fine. Well, the problem what schedule adherence will reveal for you is that person isn't taking that hour or whatever, or half hour, at the appropriate time. They take it at a time when we're queuing calls, which has a negative effect on our service level. With schedule adherence, you can ensure they follow the right time. So schedule adherence matches the scheduled activity with the actual activity minute by minute, ensuring that agents are on the phones as closely as they can be to their scheduled times. And some of the benefits you can see here. Cost containment. Obviously, if you have people at the right times, you don't need to overstaff to ensure that you're making your service levels. In other KPI improvements, you've got the staff is present just in time for the predicted volume, so that you're not overstaffed or understaffed. You have a nice even flow of volume throughout the day. This results in direct improvements in service level achievement, answer rate, and abandon rate. And of course, the smoother call queuing is a better experience for the agent as well as for the customer, the caller. It's not only more predictable, but folks have less of those periods where there are multiple calls queuing and they feel like they're pressured to continue to move on to the next one. So that smoothness makes them more at ease. So we've got a couple examples here of schedule adherence and how it's the root of some of our other problems. So our staff model called for 3 people to be staffed in the day, but we were still missing goal. The ACD reports that everyone took the appropriate total lunch and break time. So what was the root problem? All employees took lunch at the same time when they were not supposed to, according to the schedule. In example 2, our reporting showed that we were missing goals in the last half hour of each day, but all employees appeared in total to have logged out on time. So what's the problem? What we found was that employees were placing themselves into unauthorized off-phone codes just prior to the end of the day when they should have still been in an available state, hoping that they'd leave exactly at the end of their shift and avoid any calls that would carry them over their scheduled time. All right, so how does CXone help you find this information? So what we do with our reports, for those of you who may or may not have seen it, CXone produces a very easy to work with Excel sheet. And we pivot our information into an overview so that we can see each person's individual performance. And also another feature that we're working with now is to save that file over in for automation. So you can use it. The good news is that it's in a very friendly format that you can use. And initially here you see the raw data over to the left of your screen, and to the right, just below that at the bottom is our pivot table with the individual agents. So you can see from that we can get the information on how much aggregate time a person is spending in their appropriate state versus how much time we expected them to be. So I'd like to talk a little bit about setting schedule adherence goals. There's a couple different approaches that we can take with it. I'd like to first talk with you about the hard one, then we'll get into the easier ways. There's a formula. I want to talk to you about a formulaic approach to setting up a schedule adherence goal. So in order to get to what percentage, when you're first setting up your goal, you need to figure out what it is that your company what your company would find is an appropriate amount of time. So this formulaic approach is built to capture each chance a person could be out of adherence due to a call. So if you take just your 100% and minus the number of stops they have in a day times your average handle time divided by your average shift length, that's going to give you what an adherence report, an adherence goal should be. I know you guys will be getting the slides after this, so I won't go too much into the formula, but I want to make sure this was out here for you so you have something to model. If you're not personally familiar with adherence or are new to it, this is a good place to start and is easy to validate an initial starting point for you. Some of the variables we had to consider in setting the goals were, will we count time past schedule out of adherence? Does our AHT exceed your break time allowance? What's the impact of occupancy? Are we running a really, how much time are you allowing between calls? Will you allow between calls? When you have a very busy group, it's going to be harder for them to adhere to a schedule. Whereas if you're a little slower and have more lower occupancy goal, then they're going to have a little more opportunity to make it on time. Variance in schedule lengths are important with adherence because a longer individual day with the same number of stops, you'd expect that person would have a better adherence just because they have a longer, there's more minutes in the day. How will you enforce break and lunch adherence? There are different schools of thought on whether you adjust breaks and lunches if people miss them because of a call. Personally, I would, from my experience, advise the best thing to do is to set a break and lunch time and have folks follow that and have your goal adjusted so that it accounts for the possibility of those calls overriding it. Finally, here was additional stops in a day. How many times will you have someone doing something else besides their break and lunch? So if you have, say you're in a sales environment, you have scheduled outbound time where you want folks reaching back out to clients. If you have wrap up time at the end of a day that you want folks working on completing some kind of tasks, those things should be factored into the goals when setting them. So this next part is about determining whether to use schedule adherence exceptions. So really, it's a question first of yes or no, are you going to allow them? Exceptions, and by exceptions, I mean allowing folks to submit changes to their schedule based on some unplanned activity on their own. You want to determine whether you're going to allow them to do it or not. It's very common. It's not necessary. You could make a business choice to just adjust your schedule adherence goal to a lower percentage. The upside of that is that you have fewer exceptions to enter, and it's less manual work for your workforce manager or your supervisors or whomever you have entering this information. The downside is that you're going to have a lot more variance on the adherence performance because some people will have more off-phone activity that they use. How short makes a difference. More stops in a day means lower adherence. So the more times, the more breaks you have in a day, lunches, and scheduled things they do, they're going to have lower adherence because they have to stop due to a call. Lots of small system entered exceptions are just as likely to put one out of adherence as to bring them into adherence. So that's an important point. You'll have some folks who think they're being very conscientious and sending in every minute of their day. It really can work against them because they may or may not know exactly the minutes and seconds of when they went out. So for that reason, I tend to recommend at minimum an exception would be 5 minutes. Some folks, some places might choose to do 15, but or anywhere in there. It's certainly up to you. In Contact is certainly capable of doing smaller amounts, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. And considering I would consider reducing the goal by some acceptable amount of aggregate time for those small exceptions. So if you've got someone who is periodically helping others throughout the day, let's consider whether they should have a minute or two extra throughout the day that you just give them credit for within their exception goal. Moving breaks or lunches, and I kind of alluded to this one earlier. Breaks and lunch times are established by supervisors or WFM to ensure the correct number of staff on a given day or at a given time. Our goal is to ensure that the staff is as available as possible at the time the contacts are received. So for those reasons, I would strongly recommend considering that you keep break and lunch times locked in place after communicated to the staff. And I would also recommend that those times stay sacred. On phone time during planned off phone activity. So the things to consider there are you going to give people credit for being on the phone when they're supposed to be doing something else, like being at their lunch or on a meeting? You can set up your calculations when you pivot the information. You can determine what you want to hold people accountable to. What's important is, do you want to count that time against the person? There are good reasons for it. In both the case of working during your lunch or working before or after a shift, it could result in unauthorized OT. Overtime, if you are very conscious about that overtime, it may be something you want to consider. If you're more concerned about making sure that folks that your adherence reflects the productivity of them, you may want to consider just letting them have the credit for being on the phone when they're at lunch or if a call runs after their shift. So what are some of the lessons we learned from our adherence rollout? Was our supervisors could quickly understand and translate the results to their teams. Daily reports drew attention to performance and resulted in immediate remediation. There's actually a little outside tip for that. In our world, we not only produced a daily report for supervisors, but we did just a simple mail merge to send out adherence to our techs on a daily basis to make sure that they were getting that information. So having that information in front of folks on a daily basis is really helpful to getting them to manage their performance to its highest level. What didn't work? Collecting our data was more challenging than originally expected. We found as we rolled out that we had a lot more detail in the report than we expected and needed to collect data not just on the agents, but not just on their time in the workforce management schedule, but their time spent overall. We actually opted for a separate aggregate number collected through SharePoint exceptions, as opposed to capturing all those little 1 or 2 minutes here and there, as we mentioned earlier, and then deduct that total from their adherence to make them whole for their day. What I would recommend for anyone who's picking up adherence is to put together a pilot group for data collection to catch potential issues. As far as best practices, provide employees and supervisors with daily reporting, and make sure you have a resource to dissect the information in Excel. With that, thank you all very much, and Shauna, I'll hand off to you.
Great. Thanks, John. That was some really valuable information that you shared. So I really appreciate you taking the time to provide your expertise today. And with that, I'd like to ask that everyone stay tuned for our Q&A session. And that will be coming up next. Thanks, everyone. Hi there, John. We've got some great questions that have come in. And just a reminder to everyone, if you'd like to ask a question, you can go ahead and submit it through the question box. So I'll go ahead and kick it off with the first question. So John, can you share your team's real-time adherence goal?
Sure, glad to. Our real-time adherence goal is to hit a 93% for our center. That was arrived at by using that formulaic approach that I showed earlier, along with examining what we really saw on a day-to-day basis.
Great. And so I think this is a good follow-up question here. How does CXone help you manage employees that may rush through calls to meet their schedule adherence? And as a result, it could maybe negatively impact your NPS or your customer satisfaction scores.
Sure. So we use our quality is how we manage that. So we sample recordings through CXone and use those to coach our folks so that we don't have instances of anyone actually running through calls and rushing customers to ensure that. So it's through that careful monitoring, everyone knowing that that's out there, that we're able to prevent that. I would also note that InContact has an analytics program as well. While we don't presently use it, it's something that can it's constantly running live, and it keeps track of voice so you can understand the temperature and pace that people are keeping during a call. So those are ways that the system can help you with that.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'll just chime in on that. I think you're referring to interaction analytics, and that does gauge sentiment and frustration, and can help along with those lines too. So you're making sure that you're meeting your satisfaction goals as well. So another question came in. Do you apply adherence exceptions to absences that later brought doctor's notes? So if someone had an absence, but they brought in a doctor's note, you would apply an adherence exception to that?
Yeah, from an adherence perspective, we always do that if someone's off the phone. The big goal with the adherence, and this feeds back to the forecasting, is to keep track of everything that people are doing, whether you planned for it or whether you didn't, and use that information to make your future forecasts using that adherence information. So if they've got a doctor's note, definitely account for that in the adherence. That's separate from corrective action that we take. That's still might or might not apply depending on the situation that we're talking about specifically. But in the end, from the workforce standpoint, the main thing we need to know is, did we plan for it or did we not, so we can adjust for a high or low absence rate in our planning.
Great. And I think this is a good question appropriate to the times that we're in right now. So how did you see your adherence change when your agents went to remote work?
The biggest change that we saw from remote work, we expected that we'd have longer periods of individual aux code or off phone codes where folks were maybe transitioning between systems, or perhaps they were distracted by environmental stimulus in their home. Mm-hmm. The biggest one we found, however, was an issue of folks being actually logged out for a minute or two at a time, or in some cases extended periods. And this turned out to be what we didn't anticipate was was that our folks didn't all have the kind of internet that they needed to support their systems at home. Mm-hmm. So that would lead them to have internet. That would lead them to have internet drops. It did lead us, of course, into some cases where folks had just had old machines that we needed to replace as well. So those were the biggest changes we saw.
Okay. So once you saw that, were you able to kind of course correct and make adjustments for improvement? And now I'm sure things are on the right track.
Very quickly. Yeah, uh, we have actually we keep our unscheduled time. We keep an unscheduled time percentage as a separate piece in our daily reporting off to where you can see that regularly, so we understand out of a day not just was the person off for a few minutes, but what percentage of their day does that reflect, so we can address those
Gotcha.
circumstances.
Great. So this one came in and it's asking about coaching. So I have a couple of agents that are consistently out of adherence. They've coached them, but any other suggestions on what you would say they can do to help the agent improve?
Sure. Well, the first thing that I'd want to make sure of is when coaching is that the employee understands what's in it for them. If you've got a scorecard that already exists, that's the great place to start from. They can see that, and that applies to their day to day and their perhaps you have a bonus structure or some kind of other hiring plan. You can use that to you can use that scorecard to show them this is why it's important to you. Specifically, when getting into the adherence itself, I recommend that you get as much information in front of people on a daily basis as you can. So whether that's through automated reports, whether that's through mail merges of the data that's available through In Contact, just the more they see it, the more they're able to see what's happening and adjust for any changes that they need to make. And let's see. So next up, I would look at what is specifically causing their adherence to be off. So do they have large blocks of the day where they're missing time? So perhaps they're taking longer breaks, or if they're scheduled, maybe you have someone who's doing outbound calling work. And they're maybe scheduled for an hour. They're not taking it at the correct time, or they're taking longer than you expected for them. That's a possibility. Reflective of what we were just talking about with the home network situation, do they have lots of little 1 or 2 minute drops throughout the day? Now, some of that could be people who have internet issues. It's also in my experience been a tactic some folks will use is when handle time is part of their metrics to maybe log out for a minute instead of using their after call work. So this is a place where you can kind of see through those kind of attempts to get around the system. Are there lots of stops in a day? And this is one that's interesting. So if we have an inbound center, you expect that folks are going to be on the phone and try to go as close as possible to their break or lunch throughout the day. If you the more times you add in an event for them, like making outbound calls or cleaning up after ticket work, things like that, the more times that you put a stop in the day, that's more opportunities for them to be out of adherence, because they could be on a call at the time that scheduled event comes up and then it run over that event. So that's also something to consider. And then I guess other things I would think about, is it an issue of being late, or is it an issue of being late or early? If you're not entering every late minute, for example, that a person is, maybe they're showing up 1 or 2 minutes late every day, and as far as the phone system goes, that might be an opportunity. So there's lots of places. The easiest thing to do with the export in CXone Adherence is I put them out in the Excel sheet in a filter to my person, filter to the day, filter to all the time that's out of adherence, and then I can see those individual minutes as they flow by.
Great, thanks. That was some great tidbits. So to follow up, you had mentioned the agent scorecard and putting adherence on the scorecard. So how do you show that? Are you doing it daily, weekly, monthly? Like, how are you delivering that to the agent?
Oh, sure. So the scorecard itself comes out, we hold them responsible to it on a monthly basis. We have a bonus program that that provides an incentive for high performers. Each person receives the full scorecard on a weekly basis, and we provide the individual adherence reports to them on a daily basis. The reason the scorecard is weekly is because there aren't as many samples of quality that would be done during a week as there would be of opportunity. Then your data isn't changing as much for quality because there's so many fewer. You only have so many calls that are being monitored in a month, as opposed to the adherence data, which is live every minute of your day.
Right. So can you expand upon that incentive that you offer a little bit? I know sometimes our customers like to hear about what some other companies are doing in terms of incentivizing agents.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So we have a 5-point scorecard, which ranges from at the high end, we've got a far exceeds expectations and exceeds expectations, meets expectations, and then grades below that. We weight the scorecard based on our desired outcomes. So in our case, we've got our adherence, our quality, and our average handle time are our key focuses. Weighted together, and they're all pretty close. They're all pretty close. 35. Let's see. Anyway, they're all pretty close. You may decide what you want to. You'll want to decide, of course, what you want to do in your own company. But by weighting those scores together, we get a balanced look at their overall performance. For those who hit those exceeds numbers, we have a person could earn anywhere from an additional 2 to 8% every month. And we really like the monthly basis because it. And I know a lot of times you see when bonuses are being done with companies. In my past, this was actually new for me here, and I really love this. Our bonuses were always paid out annually. Except for the only folks that saw anything additional were our sales folks in my past world, and they'd see the regular commission checks. I really like that we do monthly performance bonuses for our technicians because it keeps them engaged with their performance on a month-to-month basis. So they see it regularly, they respond to it, that it fluctuates throughout the year. And it really keeps them focused on every month being a new opportunity, as opposed to some review. Sometimes you have review periods that happen once a year, and you're trying to recount the entire year. Maybe they don't remember what happened that year before. That month, I'm absolutely sold is the way to go. So.
Yeah, no, that's great because then it's kind of a fresh start at the start of every month, and you can try to hit those numbers. So did you see any changes with how people reacted to the incentives during the everyone working remotely, or did they still do their best to try to meet that, or how? I mean, I guess I'm asking you, was it still a motivator as people moved out of the office and into the home?
I believe so, for sure.
Yeah.
It was still, the bonus was still important for folks throughout. I'm trying to think here because the biggest thing that was different there was really around, I would say, was around attendance. And, it's when you're working remote, it's easier to be at your station more consistently when the start of your shift. So I imagine in that perspective would help adherence as well.
Okay, so we have someone watching, a participant who is fairly new to the contact center world, and has asked if you force staff into breaks or lunches. Do you have that capability?
We force staff. I'm not sure if they mean as in setting a scheduled time and holding them to it. If that's it, yes, we do have set schedule times. So we expect if we have a schedule making up an 8 to 5 and your schedule is to go to lunch at noon to ensure that there are other people on the phone while you're at lunch, my expectation is that you do that, and schedule adherence is the way that we ensure that. If the question is, do we force them off the phones at a time at exactly noon? No, we don't. We don't do that because that could potentially interfere with a live call. So, not something that we would do. Yeah.
And looks like we have one last question in here. Going right through here. So, what exceptions do you enter to fix exceptions, and what exceptions do you leave as is?
What exceptions do you
that
enter?
One might be a little confusing here.
And what do you use to fix them? So I think when I hear that, I think exceptions that we enter are going to be for events that are business productive. So meetings, trainings, what else? Projects, things like that. Those are the kind of things that we'd add in. If there is and as far as fixing things, if there is a business event that precludes the person from following their schedule, we would adjust for that. So there are different cases like a meeting runs over 20 minutes. So we're gonna add that 20 minutes onto their schedule, or maybe they couldn't start the meeting on time. So, but they did their best. They had a call going on. So we'll adjust for that. As far as let's see, so that covers fixing things. What we don't do is items that are not productive or not approved time. So if someone that away from desk time that I mentioned early on, it's not something that we would enter, or we wouldn't approve that because they're choosing to be out during that time. If we had a case, as I mentioned, about the person who might be logging off for a couple minutes here and there intentionally, we would not adjust for that. In the case of the person who's having technical issues, we would adjust for that if they on the condition that they report it and that they work with us to get said technical issue resolved.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Well, I think that about wraps it up for us, John. I really wanted to thank you again. It was very insightful and very knowledgeable, and I really appreciate you giving your presentation today. And I want to thank the audience as well for attending the session. And if you can, please stick around for a quick survey right after this session wraps up. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the conference. Thank you. And thanks again, John.
Thank you.